Is our reality a simulation? An actual matrix? Can we finally prove there's life after death? And what about this alien UFO thing, really? There's a lot of cool, smart people working on this stuff, and I'm talking to them. Let's take the time to really explore bigger questions. So it was late in the afternoon in Sedona, and we met at this church at the Sedona Creative Life Center. And we sat in the chapel, and during the course of the interview, the sun went down. We lost track of time. I had a fantastic day interviewing David Icke. Hi, I'm Ron James, and I've got a fantastic interview today. With me is the legendary and infamous David Icke, an author whose work everybody should know. David, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ron.
So you want to jump into current events and how they apply to our perception of reality and what's happening?
Well, the thing is that I've been researching and communicating this stuff for 20 years and connecting dots. And it's impossible to understand current events or any other events or the nature of reality, any of it, unless enough dots are connected. So let's take what's happening now with the economic situation. There's a number of things that need to be said before even that can be brought into real understanding. First of all, there's a network of families that go back to the ancient world, interbreeding families that have created what is in effect a transnational corporation, but instead of, companies and stores in the street, they're secret societies. The center of it at operational level is in Europe, and that dictates the global policy. In each country is the equivalent of a subsidiary company to the headquarters corporation. And these are secret society networks within each country, including the United States, of course, and in many ways especially. And their job is to control that country's government, political parties. Any political party has a chance of getting into government and more. So whether you therefore vote Democrat or Republican, you're voting for the same people behind the scenes. They have to control the mainstream media and as much of the other media as they can, ownership level. And from ownership it comes down through the editors and the journalists. So some things are reported, some things are not reported to suit the agenda. They control the corporations in their sphere of influence, their country. They control the oil cartel, and they crucially control the banking system. So you've got all, if you like, these subsidiary networks, secret society networks, which are there to carry out the central dictated policy which comes out of Europe. This is why all over the world you see the same things happening in all these different countries, and then the same solutions being given to the problems that are being created. It's centrally controlled. That's why we now have a global economic crisis. That's why we have a situation where the reaction all over the world to this crisis has been the same. Let's throw money at the fire, basically. The next thing you need to know before we can really understand what's going on now is that this network of families has been moving the world incessantly to a global centralization of power, a global dictatorship. To do this, when there's the few wishing to control the vast majority, you have to centralize power and you have to decentralize decision making. The more control that local people have over their own lives and different countries have over their own lives and decisions, the less power anyone at the center is going to have. So what has happened through the centuries is there has been this constant and faster moving centralization of power, and to the point now where people have given it a name: globalization. Globalization is this agenda that I've been exposing nearly 2 decades, now coming into the public arena. And there's another equation in here, which is the more you centralize power, the more power you then have to centralize even quicker. And that's why the speed of centralization and globalization has got faster and faster and faster. The next thing you need to know before we can look at present day events is that they want a structure of global power which has a world government which would have the power to dictate to every country. Indeed, they want to break countries up into regions to deunify any unified response to the edifice of power at the top. The world government would control a world army which would impose the will of the world government on anyone that wanted to resist. They want a world currency which would be purely electronic, no cash, for which there are fundamental implications for freedom, because if you go into a store now and you give your electronic money, a credit card, and they say, no, sorry, won't accept it, you can still say, well, I have to pay cash then. What about when there is no cash and that computer says no to your card, or your microchip as it's designed to be? You are completely controlled by whoever controls that computer. That's the idea. And they want a world central bank, which is bringing us closer to current events, which would dictate all global finance everywhere in the world. And finally, they want a microchip population connected to the global positioning satellite system, so they have access to where you are at all times, and many other things too, which I'm sure we can get into, that the microchip is designed to give them in terms of power over people. The last thing that we need to talk about is 2 key mass mind control techniques that I've been exposing for so long. And I call the first one problem, reaction, solution, which works like this. You want to change society in a way that you know that if you stood there on the White House lawn or Downing Street and said, we've had a discussion and this is what we're going to do, you know you're going to get a big reaction to that, adverse reaction. You want more surveillance, more control. You want this edifice of centralization of power globally. People would go, hey, what are you talking about? You're talking fascism here. What's going on? So you don't do it openly. You play problem, reaction, solution. And what you do is you covertly create a problem and you blame something or someone else for it. You then, through a pathetic and unquestioning mainstream media, you tell the people, the public, the version of that problem that you want the people to believe. And so, take 9/11. You want the people to believe it was 19 hijackers flying wide-body jets who actually couldn't fly Cessnas. Right? Okay, yeah, sounds credible. So, you got the problem, which you covertly created. You then tell the people the version of the problem you want them to believe, and at stage 2, that's the reaction. Right. You want the public to be outraged, in fear, stress, and you want them to say, in effect, something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And that allows them to go to stage 3, which is the solution, which is openly changing society through legislation to allegedly produce the solutions for the problem that they have themselves created. Now you put all that together, and now you look at the credit crisis.
Right. Now, this is a technique that's been going on for centuries. They did it in World War II. They did it during the First Great Depression. It's been a manipulation of facts and circumstances. So this is a pattern that's being repeated and repeated.
It's simple. If it works, why change it? And it works until people understand, and more are now because of the information circulating, how they're scammed through this situation. So if we look at current events, Alan Greenspan, head of the Federal Reserve, a private banking cabal, not government controlled.
Not a lot of people really understand that, but it is. Yes.
He became Fed chairman at the end of the Reagan administration, went through Father Bush, went through the Clinton years, went through much of Boy George's years, and then was replaced by someone else who's fronting up for the cabal, Bernanke. At the same time, this was going along, or at the time this was going along, people in government like Robert Rubin, another frontman for the cabal during the, he was Treasury Secretary during the Clinton years, all these different people that appeared to be unconnected but actually were answering to the same masters, they were bringing in policies all the way through this period, which was designed to create not just an economic problem this time, but a massive economic catastrophe. And what they did is they took regulation away, so that basically, in the end, it was an absolute free-for-all. And other subsidiary networks of the central cabal in Europe were doing the same. That's what happened in Britain. Exactly the same was happening. So you had eventually this global free-for-all where, you know, a monkey could come in and get a mortgage, in effect.
Sure.
Right? Now, again, one of the great ways that they obscure cold, calculated manipulation is incompetence. They don't mind if you think, "Ah, it's bloody incompetent, look at him." They don't mind that, because it's obscuring the cold calculation. So when this built up to this massive situation in terms of credit and mortgage and all this stuff, then they pulled the plug. And when they pulled the plug, suddenly along came Barack Obama, and he then appoints an economic team which is of fundamental people connected to the same cabal. So now you've got a massive problem, you've got tremendous reaction from the public in stress and fear, and what you're going to do about it. This is so terrible. We're losing our jobs, we're losing our houses, oh my God. And along comes Barack Obama, Messiah Obama, fundamental frontman, exactly like Bush to this cabal.
Exactly.
And now what these people are doing is, to use the analogy, they're getting the governments to empty the gun that they have to meet, or at least try to overcome, this economic situation, because they've crashed the economy. Now they want, as fast as possible, all government reaction possibilities to be exhausted as fast as possible. And that's why all over the world, not least in this country, you're seeing cuckoo lands amounts of borrowed money being thrown at the banks, being thrown grotesquely at AIG, and all these other institutions that have created the problem. And the next stage is to really, really crash the economy, because that's coming. We're not looking at an economic crisis. We're looking at an economic catastrophe, not just in this country, but massively in this country, but all over the world. And when they crash it in real terms, the real level they're going to crash it, how are governments going to react? What response are the bullets are fired. The gun's empty, right? And that's the idea. And so you're going to have this massive problem, a massive reaction from the public. What's the solution going to be? The solution is going to be, and we're not far from seeing it, saying that the only way to respond to this global crisis is to have a world central bank and a world network of centralized institutions to control and dictate world finance. Problem, reaction, solution. And there's another element to this, which I'm trying to get out as much as I can. Another massive element of this conspiracy to create this centralized Orwellian global dictatorship is fundamental control of the people and a police state. They want a global police state, in effect. So what we're seeing, and I was talking about this before they started saying it, I had to shake my head when these guys started.
Well, you've been talking about this stuff for years, and it's coming true more and more.
But what I'm talking about is rioting in response to the economic catastrophe.
And they actually want to bring that about, sure.
So what we're seeing now are people like Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, and one of the prime controllers of Barack Obama, and other people in the military and in the police and in the FBI and in the security agencies in Britain as well. It's happening all over the place. They're saying, oh, people could riot over this. We've had a police chief in London who's talking about his fears that there's going to be a summer of rage with riots over the economic situation and the banks and how it came about and all the suffering that's coming out of it. And the idea is that this reaction, this rioting, which they're encouraging, it's all kind of, you know, suggestion.
It's almost like they're egging people on.
I mean, there could be riots. That means go out and riot.
Right.
That's the subliminal message here. And so the idea is then to bring in the police state to react to the rioting, to save people and protect people. And if it gets so far out of hand that they want it to get out of hand, then you're going to have the public who don't understand what's actually happening and how they're being scammed going, yeah, we must have the military on the streets. That's the idea. Now, the next stage of that is, none of this has been planned yesterday or a month ago or a year ago. This is planned decades ahead. And so what they did after 9/11, an inside manufactured terrorist attack, is they used that problem and the reaction to it to offer the solution of things like the Patriot Act and all these things.
Which was just waiting in the wings, 5,000 pages of legislation. They just wrote it up overnight.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. They've got very, very quick typing hands, these guys, you know. Amazing. And of course, no one ever reads legislation before they vote for it.
Sure. And very few people know that Michael Chertoff was actually the architect of the Patriot Act, and then he ended up being in charge of Homeland Security.
This is how it works, Ron.
Exactly.
This is how it works. All over the world, this is how it works, if people could only see it. So what they've done is and it's happened in Britain, it's happened everywhere. We must stop terrorism, so we must have terrorism legislation. Oh yeah, that's right, yeah, oh please. And so what they've done is they've put all this anti-terrorism legislation, which has given them powers that they never had before, but they've not specified what terrorist and terror actually means. And all this anti-terrorism legislation can equally be applied to the people who were being told this legislation is to protect you.
So it can make terrorists out of all of us. Those of us that speak up, those of us that rally against the government and the status quo, we're all endangered by this legislation.
Let me give you an incredibly extreme but instructive example. We've had people in Britain, local councils, who have used the powers of anti-terrorism legislation to have people followed, parents followed, to see if they actually did live in the catchment area of the school they've applied for their children to attend. They've actually used anti-terrorism legislation to give them the power to have those parents followed. That's how this apparent terrorism legislation can be used on the people, right down to the most great fine detail level.
And the FBI's been caught doing a lot of things like that too. Not exactly the same, but abusing the terrorism laws to chase ordinary citizens.
There's the government you see, Barack Obama making a speech, looking at that autocue teleprompter screen, then that one, because David Icke, his senior White House advisor, who orchestrated his whole election campaign, he writes the speeches, and there's Barack, he's reading it, he looks there, then he looks there. How many times does Barack Obama look there? Very, very rarely. Why? Because he's reading teleprompter screens left and right all the time. Mm-hmm. The man's a front man. He's a used car salesman. It's interesting, Ron, when we talk about problem, reaction, solution. What we're actually seeing at this time is a presidential version of it. Because they brought Boy Bush in just as a front man. I mean, crikey, I mean, he was watching the sport most of the time.
Sure.
But they brought him in to front up the creation of the problem, which was massively extended military abroad, horrific wars, pepper bombing civilians and all this stuff. And of course, the massive economic crisis, which finally blew towards the end of his presidency. Now they're bringing Barack with the smile, and he's eloquent, especially when he's reading someone else's words. He's coming in to sell the solution to the problem, which is, you know, getting a hose and hosing dollars at a fire and thinking it's going to change anything. So what we need to understand is that this stimulus package and all this bailout of the banks is not going to work. Why? Because it's not meant to.
Exactly. Yeah, I believe that. And you know, a lot of people are waking up, and a lot of people read your work, and a lot of people listen to Alex Jones, a lot of people listen to Coast to Coast. So there is this awareness.
Yep.
But then there's also this issue about, well, what do we do about it? Where do we gather and protest? And they've got the concentration camps already built. They just passed a new legislation, HR 645, to build more and to bring out in the open the ones that they've already built. So the question becomes, and I'm sure that you've got answers to this, because I know some of your work, you do have answers. And what do we as a people do to resist this and to bring about a better world that truly does exist for the betterment of mankind?
Well, how long you got? I can talk on the you know, here and now, everyday experience level, which I probably should first, but there's much deeper things that we need to do to ourselves to really change this asylum into the paradise it could be.
I'm going to take a leap with our audience and just go ahead and assume that we're dealing with a little bit above normal knowledge about this stuff with the crowd that's going to watch this. And maybe we can go ahead and go a little deeper into solutions, possible outcomes, and really what can we do about it? How can we change it?
Well, first of all, let's talk on a practical level. What they've done is persuaded us that the power in a pyramid is the capstone, right? That's what they're persuaded. What do we do? Oh, the power's there. Who's holding it there? What's holding a capstone of a pyramid where it is? The rest of the pyramid. And that's what we do. We hold this system together through acquiescence, through watching the Super Bowl and the game shows and not thinking about actually anything else that's happening in the world. And we get told that we have to consume and consume. I mean, I heard somebody call it, and he was right. He called the American economy a consumer-led economy.
Oh, absolutely.
What does that mean?
It's the church of consumerism.
That means you have to keep consuming more and more and more just to stand still. That's what it means. And of course, once people stop consuming more, and the banks control if they do or not, because they're controlling the circulation of money and how much is in circulation, not that the money itself is an illusion too. It means that the banks are controlling by how much so-called money they put into circulation, how much consumers can consume. So what they do is they put lots of money out there, as Greenspan and his clan did, and there was lots of consumption and lots of people got into debt to consume more, and then they go, okay, we're pulling vast amounts of money out of circulation. What did they call it? The credit crunch. Now, suddenly, all the consumption, and it's a consumer-led economy,
right,
starts to crash. So what happens? The economy crashes. And it is so simple, because these guys control all the things they need to get a consumer boom. Oh, no consumer boom, we're having a depression now. Purely by putting money into circulation and pulling it out again. And so we are holding this whole system together by playing its game and by not even often even thinking about how it works and what's actually happening. So we can find a solution to the problem, and we're drowning in solutions. Or we can do the sensible thing, which is to remove the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem is our acquiescence to this system. The number of people who are in full awareness manipulating this conspiracy are a relative handful compared with the 6.5 billion they are manipulating. I see a way out of this, but only if we, first of all, drop the fault lines through which we're divided and ruled. Divide and rule is the bottom line essential to any centralized dictatorship, because they have to divide people in on themselves along the fault lines of religion, political persuasion, not that that matters when you get deeper into it, just different masks on the same face, through income bracket, through race. All these are fault lines through which they set the people at war with each other while they're pulling the strings on all sides. So first thing, it doesn't matter what your color is. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Muslim or middle-class American or Southern Baptist or if you are sky blue, bloody pink. It doesn't matter what your income bracket is, beyond the real elite of the elite. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, because they are after total control of all of us, right? Now, if we go on fighting, whoa, he's a Republican, oh, well, he's a Democrat, and all this rubbish, oh, I'm a Christian, oh, I'm a Muslim, all this stuff, therefore you don't come together and in unity and face what is massively affecting all of us and our children and grandchildren, by the way. Try telling them when the police state's in place and they're microchipped and all the other stuff. What were you doing, Mummy and Daddy, when this came in? Oh, I was arguing over Bush and Obama. Oh, I was arguing that Muslims were better than Christians.
I was watching Britney's comeback tour. Right.
It's pathetic, right? So the first thing we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is frickin' grow up, right? Because we owe it to our children and grandchildren to grow up and start coming together and start facing the fact that we are looking in the face of a global version of Nazi Germany within the lifetimes of adults today, well within the lifetimes of them. And goodness knows what it's going to be like for our kids and grandkids if we go on being sheep. You look at a herd of sheep, a massive herd of sheep. How do you control them? One shepherd, one sheepdog can do it, right? And what does the sheepdog represent? Fear. The shepherd represents authority, okay? That's how the global population is controlled, through fear of stepping out of the box and expressing the full magnitude of who we are, instead of, oh, I'm just Joe Public, I've got no power, and allowing authority to dictate just because it's authority, right? So we need to come together, and we need to stop cooperating. I keep reading, as I've traveled around America in the last 2 months, of stunning levels, hundreds of thousands a month, and more, and growing all the time, of people whose houses are being foreclosed, right, by the banks. And they're leaving their homes. They're leaving their houses. What's going on? Let's look at this. Take a deep breath, take a step back. The bank's behavior caused the crash that has meant that these people are losing their homes and therefore cannot afford the mortgages and the rents, and therefore their homes are being foreclosed by, complete the circle, the banks who created the problem. And people are leaving their homes because the banks say you must. Stay where you are. If hundreds of thousands all over the United States, all over the world, vast numbers and getting bigger all the time as this crash goes on, if they stayed put and said we ain't moving, the system couldn't cope. The system can only cope if we acquiesce and say, well, the banks that caused the problem have told me to leave, so I've got to leave.
So that's one nuts and bolts thing that people could actually do on an individual basis. They could do it sooner than later, and that is a tangible thing with very little repercussions.
When the bailiffs come, everyone, see, this is the other big thing. People go, well, it's not my problem, so I'm looking this way, right? Right. First they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. Then they came for the communists, and I was not a communist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, so I did nothing. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Nazi Germany. That's what that incredibly powerful piece of text was referring to. That's how they did it. So we'll pick you off first. It's not my problem. Well, then we'll pick these. Well, that's not my problem either. Knock, knock, knock. Now it is your problem. Who's going to speak out for me? Oh, sorry. They're all in the concentration camps, darling. Right? So this is how it's done. So as Martin Luther King rightly said, you know, injustice for all injustice is injustice for everybody. For instance, if I don't have the right to speak my truth through freedom of speech, no one else has the right to freedom of speech. It's gone. Because if I don't have the right, or anyone doesn't have the right to speak their truth openly, then it means that everyone else's freedom of speech is not freedom of speech at all. It's only the freedom to stay within the parameters that this guy's come outside of, or I've come outside of, or whatever. So when one person is not free, no one is free. So it's in our interest to make sure freedom is applied to everyone. So when the bailiffs come, let's get the neighbors out. Circle the place. We've got to start making it as difficult as possible for the few to dictate and enslave the many. And we can do it. But we must do it peacefully. Which is why I'm banging out stuff across the net now, actually, about don't riot. Please don't riot. It's just what they want.
Right.
If we react in that violent, aggressive kind of way, then we're walking straight into the trap. We need to have non-violent, non-cooperation, and have a smile on our faces. We don't have to hurl abuse at the agents of the state. We don't have to kind of be violent and all the rest of it. We just have to symbolically and literally lock arms and saying we're not having it. We're not having it. It's what I call the non-comply dance. Compliance, compliance. No, non-comply dance. Let's beat to a different drum, beat to a different awareness, beat to a different perception of who we are. Instead of the dark beat of compliance, let's beat to another drum, which says no, we're not going to comply, but we're not going to get aggressive and we're not going to get violent, because that's your job, right? If we want to change the world from what it is, then we can't react in the way the world is now that we want to change. You see this all the time. You have violent revolutions to overcome the established order. And what happens? Because violence has removed the established order, you get the same, under another name, you get the same kind of regime that you've just replaced. This has happened all the way through. If we want to have a peaceful world, then we need to be peaceful. I keep hearing people, we must fight for peace. No. It's the biggest contradiction you could come across.
A total oxymoron, right?
We must peace for peace. But, and I'm not, talking about, being what people would perceive as weak. Because you have to be, if you're going to be macho and a real man, you have to riot and you have to be aggressive and you have to hurl abuse at the police and all the rest of it, right? No. I'm not talking about being weak, and as soon as you're told to move, okay, we better move. No, I'm talking about coming from this position of love for each other, including the people that we're trying to change, and the situation we're trying to change, with peace and with an absolute, unshakable, unbreakable determination. Never in any circumstances to concede our right and the right of anyone else to freedom, justice, and fairness. Because you don't have to, riot and be violent to have the determination, we ain't moving. And while I've been in Sedona, I saw a magnificent documentary at the film festival. It was called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And I watched it and I thought, this is such a fantastic kind of example of what I'm talking about. It was about a civil war in Liberia in West Africa that was so grotesque and so extreme that people were seeing their husband having his head cut off in front of him, his wife and his children. They were seeing their children raped in front of them. They were seeing grotesque violence on a level that beggars belief. And this went on for year after year after year. And all sides were just different masks on the same face. They were all after personal power and the macho man stuff. And then a woman said enough. And then another woman said enough. And they gathered around them. First of all, about 200 women said enough. And eventually it was 3,000. And they did three things which are unstoppable if we do them. One, they said enough, and crucially, they meant it. Two, they were not going to take no for an answer, i.e. the war ends and peace arrives, no matter how long it took or what sacrifices it took to get there. And thirdly, another crucial aspect, they got Christian women and Muslim women and women from different ethnic groups to come together as one behind the unity of we want peace. They started peacefully protesting, all non-violent, in crucial places where the government could see them and all the rest of it. They started blockades and all this classic non-violent, non-cooperation methods of resisting tyranny. Eventually, it's a long story, but eventually they got all sides to the negotiating table, peace talks in Ghana. And there, for 7 weeks, these men negotiated, or rather didn't, while the violence went on and they would not call a ceasefire. Some of them had never been in five-star hotels before. They wanted the peace talks to last as long as possible because they were enjoying it, while slaughter went on back at home. So 200 of the women who were in Ghana, including the key one that orchestrated it, they went there, locked arms, and they blocked the entrance or the exit to the room where the peace talks were going on, or weren't. And they wouldn't let them out. And they said, we're not letting you out until you call a ceasefire and the peace talks reach a settlement. Someone inside called security, who came along to arrest this lady because she was obstructing justice. Ironic, but true.
Right.
And what she did then, she started to strip naked. And in West Africa, that is considered to be a massively powerful curse if you as a man see a woman stripped naked in public. And if she does it on purpose, that's even worse. So she starts to strip naked, massive panic. And she said, everyone's going to do it if this doesn't happen. Well, as she said, they would have given us the world rather than see us all stripped naked, right? Within 2 weeks, they had a peace settlement. And I think it was 2 years later, the first woman leader of an African country, elected leader, was in place in Liberia. Those women did not fire one gun. They did not injure anyone, and they were in no way violent. And they took 3 warring factions of incredibly extreme, grotesque, horrific violence that they were all engaged in. And they brought them to the negotiating table, and they brought an end to it. Liberia is still not perfect, far, far from it, but at least they did that. Now, if one woman who became 2, who became 200, who became 3,000 can do that, what the heck are we doing? Cooperating with our own enslavement. Please, would someone tell me that? Maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm thick, but I can't work that one out. And I keep hearing people, Ron, saying to me, but there's nothing we can do. No, okay. You tell that to the women of Liberia, right? No, I tell you what, there's nothing we can do actually means I ain't prepared to do anything. That's what the translation means.
Yeah, it's the apathy more than the inability.
It's an excuse not to do it. So come on, you know, this is not sometime never over the rainbow. It's happening in our daily experience now.
And it's, you know, that's another thing that maybe we could touch on is it isn't a matter of getting 5,000 people together. It's a matter of one person making one decision for themselves and then more people doing the exact same thing. So I think people see this big mountain that has to be at least climbed for the voices to be heard. And what I really want to stress, and what I hear you say over and over again, is it all starts with that individual personal decision.
Well, this is where we can get deeper into this, because Albert Einstein said words to this effect. The quote is, sometimes quoted in different ways, but the meaning's the same. You cannot solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. What we're doing all the time is we're having problems created by levels of consciousness, and those people are then replaced by other people of the same level of consciousness, sometimes optimistically the same level of consciousness, and then they think they're going to solve the problems. They're not. I've been on a long, long journey, Ron, through the last 20 years, and it's taken me through the 5 sense level of this, the kind of stuff we're talking about. It's taken me through interdimensional levels where these families connect into, outside of this reality. And then it's taken me, particularly since 2003, and it's virtually my total focus now, in terms of my movement forward in greater understanding, to the nature of reality itself. And when you start to realize what reality is, what this reality is, and how it's constructed, you start to see the real foundation of foundations of this enslavement of what we call humanity. If you connect the dots, even within mainstream science, and they don't connect the dots, they don't talk to each other in the different disciplines, most of them. This world we think is outside of us now actually only exists in our head, and even our head is an energy field in its prime state. What the prime level of this reality is vibrational, and our 5 senses. This is a holographic computer, what we call the body. The 5 senses decode vibrational information, and it's just like this is a virtual reality universe, of course, extraordinarily more advanced, staggeringly more advanced, but in principle, you can liken it to a computer program. It's called a computer game.
Absolutely.
What happens in a computer game is you've got the computer and you've got the screen. You then put the game into the computer as a disk. Now, what is that? It's information. That's all it is. It's information. The computer then reads the information and puts it on the screen. That's what we do.
Right,
That's
and
what
then it reacts to your decisions, and it renders the reality that you create.
Yeah, but the thing is that the prime reality, where the prime information lies, is vibrational.
Right.
And there's a level of this reality that's digital as well. But what happens is the vibrational information is decoded by the senses, and it's sent to the brain in electronic form, electrical signals. That sight as well as all the other senses we see with our brain. The eyes are just transmitters of information and decoders of information. So the brain then takes this information and it constructs a reality which only exists in our heads. And this is why there is no out there, it's all in here. This is all the illusion. This is why you can have the situation in quantum physics where you've got an apparently solid world, but they say it's made of atoms, okay? But what are atoms? Atoms have no solidity. They're just pockets of energy. How can atoms that have no solidity create a solid world? Because it's the decoding system that makes it appear solid. Because the brain is reading the information. So if you go back to the computer game analogy, the computer is reading information on the disk and putting it on the screen as pictures and apparently three-dimensional forms and buildings and street scenes and all the rest of it. Well, that's what we're doing in a massively more sophisticated way. Our screen is in here.
Sure.
Which takes us to another.
Now this is actually, it's almost like you're reading a treatment to a documentary I wrote almost 10 years ago called Are We Living in a Matrix, where I went through all that stuff and talked to guys like Michio Kaku and Bill Tiller and all the people that are doing the physics work to actually prove that. So the idea, our audience and everybody in this room, I think, is very familiar with the concept that we are inside what's literally a giant computer simulation.
Right. But what does that mean? The screen. The screen is the experience we're having now. If you're in a movie theater, when the movie has left the projector and it hits the screen, it's a done deal, isn't it? You're not going to change the movie then, are you?
Right.
So when our reality is constructed into this apparently three-dimensional physical world, by the time it hits the screen, as we're experiencing now, it's a done deal. And this, see, this secret society network has been passing over at the highest level, not Bill and Joe down the lodge, do a nice meal once a month. I'm talking about the highest level of the secret society network. They're passing over this information and adding to it of understanding what reality is. And so they are quite happy if we think the answers to the problems they're creating are out there. Because there is no out there, so we're not going to find it. We are, in effect, standing at the front of the movie theater, screaming at the screen, telling the movie to change. Ain't going to change. You've got to go back to the projector, you've got to change the reel, then you'll change the movie. Now, that is why, throughout what we call history, all over the world, the sages and the seers and the what you might call holy people, the common truth, if you like, all over the world, outside of this modern construct, they've talked constantly in different ways about the only way we're going to change anything is to go within. Go within. Now what does that mean? I hear this in the New Age. You got to go within. What does that mean? Well, you got to go within. No, what does it really mean? It means we've got to go to those levels of ourselves that are operating at least the prime reality level, beyond the body, where we can actually change the reality that is then decoded into this done deal. This is where the answers lie. And what we need to do, I would suggest, all of us, I'm talking about myself as well, I ain't cross-legged on a mountain saying I'm the guru, you know, it applies to all of us. We need to move from mind domination to the consciousness that we are. We are not our bodies. And if people want to transform their lives real quick, then just stop identifying with being Charlie Bloggs or Ethel Jones. Stop identifying with being the reflection in the mirror in the morning, and recognize that that is not who you are, that is what you are experiencing. It's your experience. See, I came across some information recently that said that only about 5% of our actions come from the conscious mind, right? I would say 0% of our actions come from the conscious mind. What I would say is the conscious mind is the observer, the experiencer. The decisions are coming out of the subconscious level of reality. Deeper levels go within. And the conscious mind observes it. It's the experiencer. Mm-hmm. And so we need to get to that level beyond the conscious mind where the real decisions are being taken, and change the decisions there, and then we'll play out a different world, a different movie. And the more that I kind of understand about this virtual reality game, we are consciousness, infinite consciousness, all that has, is, ever will be, if you use the illusion of time. And that consciousness is having an experience. It interconnects with this virtual reality game through what we call mind. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's not about your mind or my mind or anyone else's mind. It's your mind, it's her mind. No, I would say it's the mind. And the mind has multiple expressions. So you can be in the New Age, and you can be a Wall Street banker, but you're still in mind if you're not conscious. I see so many people who talk about being religious or being spiritual, and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, that's mind. I'm just seeing mind, not seeing consciousness. And so all these different expressions of what we call self-awareness are actually mind. It's a mind construct. Now the mind is not a bad thing. The mind is the way consciousness interconnects with interfaces with to allow us to experience this reality, consciousness to experience this reality. Because of course consciousness is on a very different vibrational level to this reality, so it needs this conduit, right? And that's good if the mind serves the experience in that way. What the conspiracy has done, because it understands how all this works, it has pulled people's sense of reality into mind, so they become mind dominated and detached from an awareness of what they really are, which is consciousness. They lose, they are basically given, not basically, they are given a false self-identity. So if you hold that or open again to the understanding that you are infinite consciousness, all possibility, having an experience, then you are going to interrelate with this world in a very, very different way, because you know it's an experience. You know you're infinite consciousness, you're all powerful, you're all possibility. You try controlling 6.5 billion people in that awareness state. Forget it, mate. You have to pull them into myopia. You have to pull them into a sense of limitation, into a sense of I can't, into a sense of little me, and you do that by pulling them into mind. And this is how it works. Once you do that, of course, when people are born into the world, the programming starts immediately. The parents who've been programmed then program their children, overwhelmingly not through malevolence, but they think they're doing the best for their kids because that's what they're programmed to think. You then go through school where you are programmed with a certain sense of reality and limitation and all the rest of it. You go through college and university. All your peers who've gone through the same system, they're telling you the same thing. It's like the whole thing, you know, if you're born to loving parents who tell you 2 and 2 equals 5, and then you go through kindergarten and school and all the rest of it, and universities, and the media are telling you, and your peers are all telling you that 2 and 2 equals 5. You go through your entire life believing 2 and 2 equals 5, but it still goes on equaling 4. But you're not living your life on that basis. You're living on the fact that it's 5. In other words, you're living your life in manufactured ignorance. And manufactured ignorance is a doddle to control compared with awareness of the truth of the situation. Disconnect people from the awareness that they are consciousness. Pull them into mind, which operates overwhelmingly through what? Through the 5 senses. This is what it does. You isolate them in mind, and you tell them self-awareness alone means they're conscious. Not true. And then, when you're in that state, where do you look for an understanding and a fix on who you are, where you are, and what's going on in the world? You're not going there anymore, because you've been shut off from that. You're here. Where are you going to look? The only way you can look, out through the 5 senses, right? Now, the people that have structured society to disconnect you from the infinite consciousness or the awareness that that's what you are, also control the information coming in through the 5 senses, through the education system, through the media, etc. So what they've done, they isolate you into mind, which should just be a conduit, and then they program that fragment of mind, if you like, with the reality that suits the agenda. You have no power, you're just little you can't change anything. And when you open your mind, I mean, all these things that are profound truths, when you open your mind, which is on one level opening your auric field to reconnect to the higher levels of self beyond mind, then what you're doing is you're moving your point of observation. And when you do that, then the world looks very different. Now you can see the connections. Now you can see what's going on in a way that couldn't. And that's why the prime foundation of this entire conspiracy is holding people in mind and stopping them becoming conscious. Now, what is happening now is that there are vibrational changes going on, which are teasing open, more than teasing open now, because it's moving, people out of just mind awareness. And that's the real revolution that's going on. And you know, I've kind of been a barometer for this, because when I started talking about these things and all these other things you were talking about earlier, nearly 20 years ago, but I couldn't fill a phone box. Basically what I got, especially in England, was mass, unbelievable levels of ridicule, because I was a BBC television anchorman, and when I started talking about this, of course, it was national news that Icke had gone crazy, gone mad. I couldn't walk down any street in Britain for about 3 years without being laughed at by the people. A comedian only had to say my name. I didn't need a joke, and the audience were laughing. And so that's where I was 20 years ago. And I've watched this awakening happen all over the world. I've been to nearly 50 countries now. This is not an American phenomenon or a British phenomenon.
Sure.
This is happening all over the world. And so we're now in a situation where the immovable object, which thinks it's immovable but isn't, the conspiracy to enslave humankind, is coming face to face with what is the irresistible force, which is people becoming conscious. It's not the majority yet, it's not even near the majority, but it's happening. And this is what is going to bring an end to this. Not tomorrow, but this is not going to be in place as these people think it is indefinitely.
So we've got basically, in this reality, a group of people who are conspiring to control and shape how humanity lives inside of this reality. But what's really happening is what's at stake is a far greater energy operating on far many different levels. That when you control it here, you're also controlling it here, here, and here. So the actual, don't want to call it the battle or anything like that, but the actual goal is the control of a vast amount of energy that we don't even really realize we control ourselves.
Yeah, this is the point. It's so important, and it's not easy, because we're constantly getting messages to pull us into this world. We need to hold the fact that the vibrational level of information is the prime reality, which we then decode into this reality, right? Now that applies to everything. So these, quote, Illuminati bloodline families that we see on the news within the projection level of decoded reality, they are also, in the end, controlled by the vibrational level of reality. They are just playing it out in the decoded world. Henry Kissinger, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Obama, the Bushes, and all these people, we are decoding them like we're decoding everything else into holographic reality, and we see George Bush and Barack Obama and the Rothschilds and all that stuff. We don't see them very often, but there you go. That tells us something about where the real power is. But if you take it back, they are decoded information from the prime reality, which is the vibrational level. So everything comes from that. That's the projector through to this done deal world. So that's where we need to change, because when we change that level, then the vibrational information that they are represented by in control and manipulation in the decoded world, that changes, because we're changing that vibrational field by changing our own. Then the projection changes. Our projection changes in terms of our everyday experience. Sometimes suddenly starts to change, and life starts to get better and more peaceful and all the rest of it, because we're now decoding a different prime information source. But also, that prime information source that comes through to be the bloodline families and the manipulation, that also starts to change.
So David, in all of this atmosphere of the need for the fascism, the need for control, and these people and forces that are coming together with this ultimate negative agenda for humanity, certainly there's balance in the universe. There's balance in the way things shake out, and there's got to be the possibility for a positive outcome of all of this too. So can we talk about, we've kind of talked about what the individual can do. Can we talk about how it's going to come about and how the forces of the universe are going to align on their own natural basis to make things a little, to make the playing field more level?
Well, I think, you know, if I sat here, or anyone sat here and said, okay, I'll give you a definitive answer to that, I mean, they're either kidding themselves or trying to kid the people there, or both. Because obviously there's a hell of a lot we don't know. What my strong feeling is, a very strong feeling, in fact, it's been the theme throughout this last 20 years, because the first book I ever wrote on these subjects, I wrote in 1990, and it was called Truth Vibrations. And it was called Truth Vibrations because I had an experience where, it's a long story, but I ended up with a psychic lady. I was still doing television with BBC. And suddenly this psychic lady starts telling me that I'm going to go out on a world stage. This figure in her mind was telling her I was going to go out on a world stage and face enormous opposition, but they would always be there to protect me. I don't know who they are to this day. I'm not really bothered. I'm just doing what I believe to be right. And crucially, from this point that we're talking about, there was coming a vibrational change that would bring about, in the way that psychic decoded it, I'd use different language, a spiritual revolution in my lifetime. And so I called the book that I wrote about that experience and some others, Truth Vibrations, because what this vibrational change was going to do, and is doing, I mean, look at it, is bringing all that's remained hidden to the surface, where we can see it. And that's what's happening. Look at it. It's becoming more and more in our face. And I am absolutely convinced that there's a vibrational change going on at the prime level of this reality, the vibrational level, and it is reharmonizing a disharmony. There's a disharmony, vibrational disharmony, in this construct, or at least this part of the construct. And that disharmony comes through to electrical signals, and it comes through to the projected world. What do we see? Disharmony. Now, as that is harmonized, you're going to see, as the people that start to tune to that harmonization process, you're going to see their lives change. It's happening to vast numbers of people already all over the world, and has been for many, many years. What is happening on the vibrational level is that the disharmony, because everything has self-awareness, because everything's in the end consciousness expressing itself in different forms, but sometimes it's very dense expressions of consciousness, like what we call mind, and therefore it has a sense of limitation rather than all possibility in the prime level of true eternal consciousness. So that, if you like, schism within the construct has self-awareness, and it doesn't want to be reharmonized because it has a self-identity of what it is, and has become in its self-awareness. Now this schism comes through into this decoded projected reality as covert manipulation, as war, as violence, as dominating the resources, as having a few massively haves and vast numbers of have virtually nothings. This is all an expression of the schism playing out through the different levels into this decoded projected holographic reality. As that schism is reharmonized, which is what's happening, we are going to see things change. And the reason we are seeing this mad panic to bring in this centralized police Orwellian fascist global state as fast as possible now is that's the schism, that is the disharmony seeking to hold on to its power from this reharmonization. And so on one level things seem to be getting so bad and so extreme, and they are in the way we play it out and experience it. But what we're actually seeing is a force of control which is in the process of being removed, in its death throes, trying to cling on to the control that that is its self-identity. Now, when I say that, this thing ain't going to crash tomorrow, and it's going to go on for a while, appearing to get worse and worse and worse, because we're in a transitional period. But this reharmonization is going to bring this down.
Now, does 2012 figure into this at all for you?
To be honest, I call 2012 a spiritual Y2K. I think it's a diversion.
Right.
And when I've seen people write about this in detail, it's very, very hard to see where this thing actually came from, that, you know, on this day in 2012 this is going to happen. Hold on a second, where did that come from? Well, so much stuff that comes to be accepted truth only becomes accepted truth through repetition. Hey, I was reading a book on the manipulation of advertising. You know, you have these Corona bowls, and when you get a bottle of Corona, it's got a lime in, right? You know how that came about? Did that come about because, oh, some marketing man, hey, that would be a great idea, or this, that, and the other? No, no. It was in a bar, and a guy had a Corona, and he said to the barman, give me a piece of lime. He said, I'm going to put lime in the top. He says, I bet you that by the end of the night, someone else will order a Corona and ask for lime in the top, which they did. He won his bet. And then, now, anywhere you go, Corona, lime in the top. No one knows where that came from. It's just repetition, repetition, repetition. And so much of this happens. And I'm telling you, I'm telling you anything. You kind of believe what you believe. I am suggesting that 2012 is the lime in the Corona bowl, right? It's repetition, repetition, repetition. By 2012, this vibrational change will be 3 years in our version of time further ahead. So yes, it's going to be imposing itself more in people's awareness at that time. But I don't see 2012 any different to 2011 or 2013 in the sense that that's a special year. I don't see that. It's just my view. And the point is, Ron, it doesn't matter whether it is or it isn't, except I and other people that run similar websites I know are getting people saying to them, well, what's the point in doing anything, because it's all going to change in 2012 anyway, right? Which is what they want, a holding position. Right. You do nothing, mate, for the next 3 years, and then we can push our stuff on unmolested, okay? You wait for 2012. It's going to be fine. It's all going to change then. Oh, please. Oh, please. Right? So, when you come down to it, it's all these ancient recurring truths. We need to go within ourselves to that level of us, which is projecting reality. And I can only say what I said earlier and what I found. If you just move your point of observation, because people say, well, how do you do that? And I understand, you know, I asked it many years ago. Well, how do you do that? If you move your point of observation from I am David Icke to I am infinite consciousness having an experience as David Icke, or an experience called David Icke, and he's not who I am, he's what I'm experiencing. And that reflection in the mirror is my vehicle. You can look through your eyes, you look in your eyes, you can see the real you. That's where, you know, the eyes are the window on the soul. I think it's a great truth. If you can get to that movement of your point of observation, your self-identity, from I am this to I am infinite consciousness experiencing this, then massive energy shifts start to happen. Because what you focus on is the energy state that you then create. For instance, as tests and experimentation and studies have shown, when you have a rigid belief, the neurons in the brain actually fire off in a certain sequence. And they keep firing off in that sequence. And that's why your belief your rigid belief, whether it's religious or political or whatever, or racial, is constantly decoding your experience and your sense of reality through that belief. And therefore it's filtering all the time the way you see reality. Your belief is controlling your sense of perception. Once you move your sense of belief, your sense of self, from I am, my body and my name, to I am infinite consciousness having an experience as that, then suddenly, even on the brain level, those neurons start to fire in a different way. And right the way through the electrical signal level of decoding, right through to the vibrational level, you shift. And if you shift on a vibrational level, because you've moved your sense of self-identity, then all the way through the decoding system into this experience reality, everything starts to change. And what can happen, and what happened to me, and what happens to so many people, is you make that choice, or you make that intent, that's the powerful force of change. Your intent is, I want to transform, I want to be the full magnitude of I am, I want to know all that there is to know, right? What then happens is there's an energy shift. That energy shift starts to change your vibrational state, therefore your decoded reality. And in the decoded world, what happens is your life falls apart. And your relationships end, you lose your job, this happens, you lose your house, this happens, that happens. And 2 years into my journey, I was walking down the streets in Britain, being laughed at wherever I went. Couldn't go into a bar, there was uproar, right? And I'm thinking, if this is spirituality, mate, you can flipping stick it. This is no fun. But what was happening was my old energy state, vibrational state, was changing, was breaking down to be replaced by another one because of a transformation I was going through. And what I was experiencing as an apparent nightmare experience was the old structure collapsing. Collapsing. Yeah. So the other one can come through. Now, I ask this question. Who's controlling who in this whole situation we're facing now, collectively? Because collectively, what's happening? The system's collapsing. And what is this system that's collapsing? It's the system that's enslaved generations and generations and generations of people. And if that system did not collapse, then that would crush and snuff out, as it has, any attempt to create an alternative system. So what we're experiencing now, I would say, if you go to that level of it, we're seeing our prison disintegrating. Now, as that happens, we can sit in the cell, even though the bars are falling, and think, no, I'm staying here because this is my comfort zone, and I'm going to wait until those bars go back up even thicker. And that's what they're counting on, isn't it? Or the bars have collapsed. Can look up and run. I'm out of here. And it's not a case of waiting for frontman Obama or anyone else to say, this is what the solutions are. They won't create solutions. They're not supposed to create solutions. We need to do it. And we do that by supporting each other, by letting the fault lines that divide us fall, and by ceasing to cooperate with the system. And when that happens, the system cannot survive, because we are absolutely essential to holding it together. And this is a good way to finish. Years ago, back in the 80s, and when I was in television, I was a friend, I would say a friend, but I knew a man called Larry Grayson. He was a comedian in Britain. He died a few years ago. And in fact, he died in the early 90s. And I went along to his memorial service in Covent Garden in London, where this other well-known comedian in Britain made an address at this event, in which he told a story that Larry Grayson had told him from years before. Larry Grayson was in a show, all-male show, traveling around Britain, and he was the one that dressed up as a woman. That's what he used to do. He said in the end of the show, the last scene, was all the men came on the stage dressed as sailors, singing Rule Britannia. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves and all that rubbish. And then as the music built up to the finale, they all got on each other's shoulders and formed a pyramid on the stage. And then Larry Grayson came on dressed as Britannia, you know, with the sword and the shield and the long gown. And he was manhandled up the pyramid to the top, the capstone, for the big finish, right? And as Larry, he told the story as Larry told him. He said one night, he said, one of the sailors in the bottom left-hand corner had got rather a cough, right? And the cough got worse and worse until he could no longer stand there holding in his position. And he stepped out of the pyramid. Larry Grayson, symbolic of this elite at the capstone, ended up in the second row. And everything was chaos. There were people all over the place. Now, symbolically, Larry Grayson hasn't caused the collapse, this all-powerful at the capstone. One sailor got a cough in a crucial position because, like I said earlier, a pyramid, the bottom holds the top up, not the other way around. And if we just walk away from this system by letting go of fear of not walking away and just stop acquiescing with our own enslavement, then we'll hear a lot of bangs behind us because the pyramid will fall. And then we can start building a different system. Perhaps no system at all in that sense, where we'll live in a world very different from the one we have. We're looking at the end of the trinket society, and that's a good thing because the trinket society thinks it controls the trinkets. The trinkets control the people,
right?
The desire for them. And we're going to live in a different world, but the system that has enslaved us has to go. And it's not in the power of these families to say if we live in the world they want or not. It's in our say whether we allow it to happen. And tell your kids or your grandkids what you were doing when you had the opportunity to bring it to an end. And there'll be a lot, if nothing happens, changes. There'll be a lot of people averting their eyes when their kids ask them that question. We still have time to not to be asked that question, but we don't have forever. So we're at the crossroads, or even better, we're at a fork in the road. Global fascism, freedom like we've never experienced.
So really it just all boils down to individual choice and us making the decision within ourselves to connect with our higher source and be pure with that.
Yeah, it's not a case of, you know, people talk about seek and you shall find. You know, we don't need to seek. We are infinite consciousness. What we do is throw and allow to be thrown barriers that disconnect us from an awareness that that's what we are, so that we identify who we are with the body and the name and the job and all the rest of it. And if we let that self-identity go, then what is left then is consciousness. You know, our natural state is consciousness. And to use an analogy, if you have a ball on a tank of water, its natural state is to float on the top. Our natural state is to be conscious. To put that ball in an unnatural state, you have to push it to the bottom of the tank, and you can't let it go. You have to hold it there. That's why this manipulation is incessant and constant and 24/7, because it has to symbolically hold our natural state, the ball at the bottom of the tank. It can't let go, because once it does, zoom, natural state. And so we don't have to find consciousness. We are consciousness. We have to remove the illusions and the barriers that we throw around, vibrational barriers as they manifest themselves, that disconnect us from an awareness, our awareness of who we are. And you know, I would say this finally. I keep hearing that knowledge is power. It's not. Knowledge is not power. The use of knowledge is power. And I can understand people who do nothing because they're in complete ignorance of what's going on and don't feel there's anything to do. But I do shake my head often when I see people who have some level of awareness of what is going on and the potential consequences of it. And their response is to do nothing or just to hurl abuse at other researchers or other people who are saying different things to them about what's going on. I wouldn't like to be them when their kids say, "Mummy, Daddy, what were you doing when this all came in?" Because I think that's pathetic. Like I said early on in this chat, we need to grow up, and we need to grow up fast, because this is no place for juveniles, what's going on now.
David, thank you.
Thank you.